People's eyes literally bulged at the extreme prices. This was the kind of weapon he wanted. Then he finally acquired a katana. Now he had arrived at the furthest reaches of strength. He was sure he would easily be able to beat Gazef. But he didn't let that make him arrogant. He never missed a day of training. If he closed his eyes, he could see it. He remembered that tournament. He remembered Gazef's elegant fighting. He remembered his figure as he smoothly evaded a blow no one had ever dodged before. He remembered the 4 slashes he unleashed at once. He couldn't remember ever being beaten. The only thing burned into his brain was the sight of the man who had beaten him. As he proceeded toward the entrance to the cave, a faint smell of blood reached his nose. He couldn't hear any more screams. This meant all the men who had crowded into that area had already been killed. It had taken about 2 or 3 minutes. He had given at least 10 men standing orders to rush the entrance. This was to buy time with defense for the ones farther in to get ready. If they had been killed already, they must be as strong as I am if there are only 2 of them. Brain grinned. He continued with the same light step. He took a potion from his belt pouch and guzzled the contents. The bitter fluid washed down his throat into his stomach. Then he had one more. The heat in his stomach ignited and expanded, flowing to every corner of his body. His muscles reacted, powering up with audible bulging noises. This sharp increase in physical strength was a result of the magic in the potion's lesser strength and lesser agility. Potions didn't need to be swallowed. Sprinkling an appropriate amount over the body would also work, but Brain simply believed that the effects were greater when he drank them. Of course, it may just have been him, but sometimes faith in something could produce powerful results. Next, he took out some oil and dripped it onto the blade of his katana. It left a pale gleam on the blade and disappeared, as if being soaked up. The name of the oil was Enchant Weapon. It was only temporary, but it increased the sharpness of his blade by imbuing it with magic. Engage 1, Engage 2. Reacting to the keyword triggers, his ring and necklace gushed magical energy that enveloped his body. His eye necklace protected his eyes while it was active. It conferred blindness resistance, infrared vision, low-light compensation, and more. If a warrior's weapon didn't connect, it wasn't worth a thing. If their opponent's eyesight failed them, adventurers would take advantage of their weakness. They would use projectiles to safely attack from a distance as a matter of course. In fact, some adventurers had caught Brain in just that sort of trap before he acquired the necklace, and his ring, which was a ring of magic binding, could be injected with a low-tier spell for use when the wearer wished. It cast lesser energy protection to reduce attribute damage. If they were really attacking in small numbers, then he had to go at them at full power. Better to cast it now than regret casting it too late. Now all his preparations were complete. He expelled the intense heat erupting inside him with deep breaths. Brain, as he was now with his powered-up physical strength, probably stood at the peak of human swordsmen. A fierce look of complete confidence appeared on his face. I am all ready for you, so you're going to have to entertain me. With each step, the smell of blood grew a bit stronger. He saw 2 shadows. Hey there, looks like you're having fun. It's not so fun at all. Perhaps it's because none of them are very strong, but I can seem to get a good pool going. The unguarded reply reached him as Brain slowly showed himself. They must have already known he was there. He hadn't been trying to hide, so it wasn't so surprising. His brow furrowed slightly upon seeing the invaders. There were 2 women, but one of them was just a kid, and they were wearing dresses. However, he abandoned those thoughts a moment later. Above the head of the girl, whose beauty could have been called peerless, he saw a sphere made of what looked like blood. I've never seen a spell like that, but you casters, huh? It was still strange for them to be wearing dresses, but if they were casters, he understood why they didn't wear armor. A faith-type magic caster. I believe in the origin of the bloodline, the divine ancestor Cain Abel. The divine ancestor Cain Abel. Never heard of that god before. Is it a malicious god? Yes, it's that type of deity. Although I heard it was defeated by the supreme beings, apparently he was a small fry event boss. Brain looked away from the little girl as she murmured, I would expect nothing less of the supreme beings. He observed the woman who was accompanying her like an attendant. She was also a beauty. She had voluptuous breasts and a sensual aura. Her white dress had spots of crimson here and there, so she was the vanguard. He shrugged and gripped his katana tightly. Well, whatever, I am ready to go. If you ray not, I'll give you some time. What do you say? The little girl looked at Brain in surprise, then covered her mouth and laughed discreetly. Well, aren't you brave? Are you quite sure you ray all right fighting alone? I don't mind if you call your friends. No matter how many weaklings there are, none of them will be able to lay a hand on you anyhow, right? In that case, I am fine on my own. There's nothing I can do if none of you understand how high the stars are in the sky. Reaching out your hand because you think you can touch them should be left to little girls like Aura. When a grown man does it, it's creepy. I think we need people like that. I guess little girls don't understand a man's romance. Brain held his katana with the tip pointed squarely at her eyes. In response, she looked up at the ceiling, clearly bored, then back at him. Go. When the young girl gestured with her jaw, the woman leaped at him. Her motion was truly Gale-like, but it was no sweat for Brain to slice like the wind. Chest. He roared and simultaneously used all the power in his body to brandish his sword overhead and bring it down instantly. It was a blow with enough force to easily cut an armored warrior in two. They all felt the gust of air. Not deep enough. He intercepted her mid-leap, but she grasped her shoulder and jumped aside. His sword had sliced through her left collarbone to her chest. Brain frowned. Something else bothered him besides the fact that she hadn't been defeated in one strike. Not a drop of blood came from her wound, despite the fact that a fountain of it wouldn't have been surprising. Was it magic? He squinted when he saw what was happening beneath the hand she was holding to her shoulder. The cut was closing up, albeit slowly. He heard rumors of rapid healing spells, but it didn't seem like one of those. Then there was only one answer: she was a monster with regeneration ability. Her sharply pointed canine teeth, her crimson eyes brimming with hostility, her general appearance almost indistinguishable from a human. Once he had thought that far, he realized what she was. A vampire. So special abilities include rapid healing, bewitching eyes, absorbing life force, creating lesser kin through blood-sucking, resistance to weapons, and resistance to cold. He thought there was more, but well, whatever. He tightened his grip on his katana. Whatever she was, he would cut her down. The woman opened her eyes wide. Her crimson pupils seemed oddly large. The inside of Brain's head felt hazy for a moment. He even felt some fondness for the enemy before him. But with a shake of his head, he cleared it away. Bewitching eyes. He wasn't so mentally weak that he'd fall for a charm of that level. When Brain's katana was drawn, his mind was like his sword. He could easily shake off typical mind control techniques. The vampire menacingly bared her fangs in hate, but there was also fear in her display. If she was confident she was stronger, she should have been able to just attack. In other words, she was on guard after being injured, or she had decided he was a tough opponent. Clever girl, but he supposed even a wild animal could figure out that much. Brain approached her with steady footsteps. She responded by gradually backing away. Well, this is no fun, Brain snorted. He wondered if she comprehended his provocation. Seemingly responding, the vampire stopped her retreat and advanced slightly. They were about 3 yards apart. This was a distance the vampire could close in an instant. The reason she didn't charge was her uncertainty about how skilled Brain was. It made her cautious. Then, with a faint smile, she thrust out her arms. Shock wave. The wave warped the atmosphere as it approached Brain. This spell could easily dent full-plate armor. If he took a direct hit in nothing but a mail shirt, it would surely cause a lot of damage. And if he took even one hit, the battle's balance would change. Their baseline abilities were very different. If you're going to celebrate, you should do it after you land a hit. If you don't want to give away your moves. Unharmed, Brain had no trouble dodging the invisible shock wave and smiled coolly. The vampire panicked and pulled back from him. She had always considered humans an inferior species, looked down on them, but now her face showed she realized her mistake. Brain didn't show it in his expression, but he realized he needed to rethink the way he was fighting. He hadn't expected her to use magic. Brain's target was Gazef, so he would challenge him to a sword fight. For that reason, his magic wasn't as sharp as his swordsmanship. He lacked the knowledge to guess what his opponent would do next. As a result, they both ended up cautiously staring each other down. This made the little girl impatient, and she found the scene unpleasant. Okay, time to switch. She snapped her fingers, parching, and the dry sound caused the vampire's whole body to shudder. Keeping the vampire, who was looking around in front of him, Brain didn't move. It was the perfect time to attack. But he didn't. He took his eyes off the vampire and observed the little girl. She had a slim body. She was very thin, considering how large her chest was. Her arms were slender. They looked like they would snap like twigs if Brain went all out. There were all kinds of faith magic casters. She could be a cleric, well accustomed to melee combat, or a priestess proficient at magic. She could even be a bishop who completely specialized in magic. But if she was swapping in, that meant she was confident she could fight even without a vanguard. Brain cracked a smile. It doesn't seem like she summoned that vampire, so she must be one too. What's more, from her attitude, it seemed she was the vampire's superior. For a monster, external appearance didn't have to match the inside. It wouldn't be strange if this little girl had higher physical strength than the vampire. She had seen Brain's strength as a warrior and still chose to fight him. And wasn't the vampire scared of her? A master the vampire fears, she must be fairly strong. He couldn't let his guard down. Continuing to observe her, he furiously worked his brain to figure out what she must be. If she is a vampire's master, could she be one of the legendary vampire lords? Supposedly, there was one called Nation Breaker who destroyed an entire country. The old stories say that the 13 heroes slayed him. The fact that one of the 13 heroes did it meant it wasn't impossible. Brain tensed his sword hand and slowly moved into a fighting stance. I am Brain Unglaus. He got a puzzled frown in response to naming himself to a powerful enemy. Feeling a bit sheepish, he asked, "What's your name?" "Oh, you wanted to know my name? You should have just said so." Cocytus would have understood immediately, but I don't think of humans in that way, so it took me a while to realize. "My apologies." She picked up the skirt of her dress and curtsied as if she'd been invited to dance at a ball. "Sholtia Bloodfallen, allow me to one-sidedly enjoy this." She bowed gracefully to the man pointing his sword at her. Was she assuming he wouldn't attack, or was she just confident that even if he did, she could handle it? The girl's expression gave a clear answer. She thought she could. She wasn't worried about him in the least. "I'll wipe that smug look off your face." Brain silently sent her a sharp glare. It would frighten even battle-seasoned warriors. He really didn't care for that look on her face, but he was also glad she had it. The arrogance of the powerful. That was one thing humans had over monsters. Monsters often had physical strength far exceeding theirs. Brain had taken advantage of it many times. He had defeated monsters stronger than him, and what really mattered was being able to sneer at them after slaying them. It was about teaching them that there are some opponents you can show your confidence to, and some you shouldn't. Are you not planning to use any martial arts? Martial arts were special abilities. Warriors learned them with intense training. They strove to reach the peak of their abilities. From their kai, or maybe their aura, martial arts produced things that still couldn't be explained. These things were called magic achieved with weapons. If a warrior was up against an opponent with a much larger build, the martial art fortress would absorb the shock of incoming attacks. This gave them the edge to fight head-on. Fatal Edge, an intense slash attack, could slay enemies in one hit, even ones with high health. It was unleashed by focusing on their blade. If a heavily armored enemy appeared, it was a good time to use the blunt weapon martial art Heavy Blow. With the temporary increase in physical ability from ability boost, victory was a simple matter of leveraging the momentary gap in strength. For a warrior, learning a wealth of arts and developing their own to use in a variety of situations was the type of preparation done as a matter of course. This was especially true if one was an adventurer, since their profession required them to be highly adaptable. But as for Brain, I wouldn't use them on the likes of you. That's how he replied to Sholtia, but of course, it was a lie. He wasn't foolish enough to show his hand. Slowly exhaling, he lowered his hips and put his katana back in its sheath. He was preparing to draw long, shallow breaths. At the moment he reached extreme focus, with his entire consciousness zeroed in on a single point, it counterintuitively expanded. He became aware of the area's sounds, air, and signs. He could perceive everything. This was domain his first original martial art. The 3-yard radius it covered wasn't so large, but he was aware of everything that happened within it. Simply put, the art raised his attack accuracy and evasion ability to the limit. Add to that Brain's trained body, and the power he gained from this art was beyond compare. Even if 1,000 arrows were to rain down on him, He was confident he could pick out only the ones that would hit him and cut them down to emerge unscathed. Not only that, but he was able to move precisely enough to slice a grain of wheat, and only that grain of wheat, at a distance. And then chopping a vital point with one blade would kill a living thing, so pursuing, that was all that mattered. Brain wasn't he a jack of all trades? He was an extreme specialist. He aimed to deliver a fatal blow even 1 second faster than his opponent. This intention led to his second original martial art instant strike. His sword reached a speed that made it impossible to dodge. But his training didn't stop there. His discipline from then on was extraordinary. He performed instant strike tens of thousands of times, probably millions of times, until he developed art-specific calluses. His hand even warped around the hilt of his katana. By pursuing instant strike to the extreme, another art was born. His speed was such that no blood remained on the blade at the end of his swing. He felt he had reached the realm of the gods and called it divine strike. It was impossible for his opponent to even perceive him unleash it. By using those two arts, domain and divine strike, the resulting blow was both impossible to dodge and a one-hit kill. He would aim for a vital point, most often the neck. And then there was the hidden technique, whistling wind. He named it for the sound of the fountain of blood that resulted from severing a head in one blow. Even if a vampire didn't bleed, surely severing its head would mean victory. Are you almost ready? Brain stayed silent, breathing in and out sharply. Sholtia shrugged at him, seemingly bored. Then I'll assume you're ready and attack. If you have any objections, please speak up now. A short time went by. Here I come, she announced playfully and began her approach. Shut up. He'd like to see her keep up that attitude once he'd chopped off her head. He didn't say it out loud. He felt if he spoke, the energy he'd been gathering would disperse. Sholtia casually stepped forward. Her gait showed no caution whatsoever. Her steps were so light she might as well have been heading to a picnic. It wasn't the walk of a warrior. Brain suppressed his wry smile. He could only consider her foolish, but he wasn't about to give her any chances. Using ability boost and his domain martial art, he eagerly awaited the instant she would be at the right distance for him to strike. The foolish monsters who behaved as though they were the strongest were generally like this. Humans were certainly fragile creatures. Their physical skills were inferior. They didn't have any special abilities, but I am going to teach her how dangerous it is to make light of humans. Martial arts were created so that humans might oppose creatures far stronger than themselves. She'll fall with one slash. The more conceited a monster was, the more desperately they floundered when forced into a corner. If he didn't kill her in one hit, she'd probably appeal to the vampire for rescue. Then it'd be 2 against 1. That would be a hard fight, even for Brain, so it had to be a one-hit kill. He scoffed at her with a straight face. He noticed the way she approached so casually. It was as if she didn't know she was walking up the steps to the guillotine. 3 more steps, 2 more, 1 more, and then your head is mine, he thought the words as he flung himself at her. Suit. His exhalation was sharp and short. The katana flew out of its sheath and stretched toward Sholtia's neck, cutting the air itself. If one could compare its speed to something, it was a bolt of lightning. By the time the flash registered, the head was falling. That's how fast he was. Millions of repetitions had created a strike that truly reached the realm of the gods. He understood. He was sure, and his eyes widened in spite of himself. He had cleaved through the air. If his strongest attack was completely dodged, he would have admitted that an unimaginably strong enemy had finally appeared before him. But Sholtia had caught his strike that was as fast as a bolt of lightning. As gently as if she were pinching the wing of a butterfly, his brain felt as if the air had frozen. He breathed desperately in and out. That can be, he panted in an almost silent whisper. He felt like his whole body was going to start trembling, but he restrained himself with everything he had. He couldn't believe what he'd just seen, but Sholtia's 2 slender, snow-white fingers, a thumb and an index finger, were right there, on the end of his sword. She didn't catch the cutting edge in front of the tempering pattern. Instead, she pinched the ridge on the flat of the blade, with her wrist bent at 90 degrees. She hadn't stopped the attack in its path. Instead, she caught up with it from behind, caught up to his divine strike. It looked like she wasn't putting any effort into holding it, but when Brain tried to push out of it or pull back with his full strength, the sword would not budge. It was as if he was pulling on a chain connected to a massive boulder hundreds of times larger than himself. Suddenly, the pressure on the sword increased. Brain found his posture crumbling. Cocytus has a few of these, but when the one using it is as weak as you, I can't be bothered to feel any wariness. Sholtia raised the tip of the sword to eye level and examined it closely. As her words sank in, Brain felt his mind go blank. He felt the despair of having his entire way of life refuted. He wasn't crushed, though, because of his previous defeat. In the same way a broken bone grows back thicker and harder, his tolerance for defeat had gone up. This couldn't be happening, but he had to accept it. She caught his godly fast strike without breaking a sweat. Sholtia frowned quizzically at Brain, who was all but pale from shock.